Oh, okay. I think the recording has started, and I think we've got everybody on again, with the exception of Andrea, who was a maybe. So, yeah, I think we can go ahead and get into the
Okay.
discussion.
All right. Great. What I think our conversation ended with as next steps last time. So let's start with, am I on track with what I think that was? And then, how can I and or this meeting be helpful with it? I have three things noted that we left with as next steps. And I think I'd contextualize it. And Nathan, I'm so glad that you're able to join today because some of it is me rephrasing something that you said that I think was kind of a game changer in terms of like next steps for the plan, um, which is just kind of changing it from a discussion of how do we update the plan to a little bit of a deeper, more nuanced discussion of how do we approach this next plan in a way that is most productive. And that's why I think we said we wanted to have another conversation. And so the three things that I had noted are um, what are the issues that we have the ability to impact directly? So from the last version of the plan, there were some issue areas identified in some of the goals that are things that we aspire to see happen, um, but our direct impact on them is somewhat tangential. So sort of rephrasing our language and our emphasis of the work on what is our core potential to create change. And then we can add to that the reasons that we're doing those things. Those reasons are because of these areas we believe they have impact. So, for example, we had a conversation about food security. Now, Volunteer Tennessee is not a food security providing organization. Now, we hope that increasing people's employability and economic development allows them to do that, but we don't really get to own food security. It's kind of not ours. The second question that I feel like we left with was how do we organize our goals based on the buckets of work so that there's clearer accountability for which working committee is responsible and their staff alignment for accomplishing that goal. Because one of the things that was confusing and maybe less than the most productive outcome for folks with the last plan was there may have been a goal area that touched two or three different committees, and it was hard to really hold a single committee accountable and have that committee also know you own this. So a conversation about that. And then the third, which directly relates back to that, is something that Jim brought up, which is it has been a long time since the committee structure was reevaluated. We did the tweak 6 months ago, but in terms of really asking the question of are these the committees that best power the work? So that is a question that's on the table. And in my mind, 2 and 3 are directly related, right? So if something wants to be a high impact, high emphasis goal, it probably needs a matching committee and staff dedication to it in order to power it happening, right? So I think that the answer to 2 is going to help to inform the answer to 3. And then the big overarching question, again, which I think, Jim, maybe is a great place for you to help us segue into the discussion, is making the distinction between the things that we would like to see in the world and because those are a lot, right? I mean, and that's absolutely right that we are dedicated to volunteerism because of our belief in the ability to make things better. The question for us strategically, though, is what is our unique value position and what are the assets that we specifically can use to create good outcomes? What do we get to own and what are we called to do based on those assets? So I guess my first question would be, does that sound to those who were on the last call as though those were the things that we were revisiting. Did I miss anything? Did I state anything incorrectly? Anything you want to add to those? Now, we know we don't trust that I did that well. Come on. All right. Well, then the second question, Jim, I'd throw back to you first, which is remind us what's our core, what's our unique value proposition as we talk about the things that we want to be strategically aligned with. What's our role?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you two answers. One is the statutory role, which the commission has very specific roles and responsibilities under the federal statute, and the executive order mimics those requirements. And so those are things related to primarily administering the federal funding that comes through the AmeriCorps agency. So the AmeriCorps funding that we have on a regular basis, Volunteer Generation Fund, which is a nationally competitive pot of money. So sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. But administering those federal funds, providing programs with training and technical assistance, that's some of the big stuff. One of the other federal requirements is this plan that it's actually in the federal statute that state service commissions are required to do a state service plan that covers a 3-year period. There are some other kind of statutory requirements that fall under those two kind of big baskets, but that's kind of the stuff that we're required to do, or what the commission is required to do as a state service commission. Now, to look beyond just what's the minimum, what's required is what can the commission do, and that then goes into a slightly bigger set of baskets of under the mission, which is to encourage volunteerism and community service. And so that's kind of the big picture, is how does the commission encourage volunteerism and community service? And there are some programs that the commission has to do that, including the statewide volunteer portal, the statewide conference, the Governor's Volunteer Stars Awards, the Award of Excellence program. So there are programs that the commission does that aren't statutorily required, but are directly related to the commission's current mission to encourage volunteerism and community service. Now, as I mentioned on the other call, the mission also hasn't been reviewed and revised in a long time. If the commission is happy with the wording of it as it is now, that's totally fine with me. But it is something that the commission might want to consider now as it's looking at kind of these other things. Is the mission still worded appropriately? Does the commission want to change it, refine it, redefine it?
I think that's something for the chairs to noodle on together, maybe as sort of a think tank for that. For what it's worth, when I'm working with a client that has a mission as one of their to-do lists when they're doing strategic planning, I've actually changed the way that a lot of other consultants do it, and I do it backwards. I encourage you to get through the plan and decide what your goals are and what's important to you, and then ask yourself whether the mission statement is an accurate summary and reflection of that, rather than trying to wordsmith a mission statement first. It seems like it almost wants to write itself if you're clear about what your goals are first. So that may be just something to think about. The reason that an organization might do it the other way around and have a mission discussion before they talk about goals is if they're not sure what their future looks like, right? If we serve an immigrant population, and we don't really know what our next activities are going to be. We need more clarity around that because we have 100 choices and we need to choose 5 of them. So they might decide that they need to figure out their mission first so that it can become the litmus test for some of the ideas they have. I think in our case, it seems to me that the nature of the work that we do is fairly fundamental to the commission, and it would make more sense for the mission statement to reflect that than the other way around. I'm certainly not saying that's the correct answer. I'm just saying that's sort of how my brain is thinking through some of it. Destiny, I know you do some of this work as well. What are your thoughts about next steps in the process, if you don't mind me asking you?
I'll be honest with you, Kim. I was just along for the ride, so I wasn't strategically thinking at this moment.
Okay. You're listening and taking it all in. I hear you. I hear you.
I was not having that radar. Like, that was not my focus. No, I can go into that lane, but I was letting you have your own lane and wasn't trying to step in. I can turn it on, but I'll be honest, I wasn't strategically thinking at the moment.
No worries. I'm always looking for somebody to share my lane with. I don't like it when I'm the only one in it. So I don't trust my gut check enough for that.
Okay, well, I'll turn it
Jim,
on
I wonder.
I'll start thinking differently.
Okay, you could be my safety check. Jim, do you happen to have the document easily shareable of the current goals? I apologize, I didn't queue that up as I came running back to my desk.
Do you mean the current state service plan or the work that this committee did last time?
That's a great question. Which one do you want to start with? The work we did last time?
I would say so.
I would say so. I don't love the old plan, so let's not start with that.
Yeah. That was kind of like non-existent for us. I think we kind of made that.
Yeah. Let's not lean into what we don't love. How about that?
Yeah, okay. Well, I do have that document open, the work that the committee did last time. I don't have the current plan open, but I can open it. But it sounds like people don't.
I feel like that answers the question for us. The one that you felt the need to open must be the one that your head was working with. So that's absolutely the right answer.
Yeah, well, this is where the committee left off. These are your notes, Kim, not the AI notes.
Okay.
But I can certainly open up the AI notes as well if you.
Right.
If you'd like.
Right. Oof. I never know what to do with those because they're just so comprehensive. Can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah. So our core areas of work. It seems to me that was the piece that I was most drawn to as I was making my notes and we were talking through things. I think that's trying to make sure that I'm not misremembering. Yeah. I think either our what or our why are the areas where I think we want to start with. Do those become our goals? Right. And if they are our goals, obviously they might get wordsmithed or tweaked or realigned a little bit. But if we talk about what everyone shared or what they believe the core work looks like, then it makes sense to me that the strategic plan should reflect those. And I think that was the reason that we wanted to get back together with a second member when possible of each of the committee work groups so that you all could all sort of hear and talk about the same thing and then go back and build out the strategies for those. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so. Yeah, I was just looking to see, actually the AI version might have
more detail.
Yeah, it might have the next steps.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's helpful, but I think kind of where the committee left things off last time was to kind of come back and consider can this committee refine some potential big picture goals to then take to the commission at its May meeting
That's right.
for the full commission to kind of discuss the big picture goals, to say,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we agree with the entire slate, or we agree with these three and not these two, or, you know, whatever combination might come out of that
Right.
full commission discussion. But that's why we wanted to bring in the additional committee members, so that it was a few more brains looking at it as
Right.
this group kind of discusses what it might propose to the full commission in May. Because to be honest, I don't think we have enough time to take what comes out of this meeting and then have committee meetings and then have the meeting May the 2nd.
That's right.
Yeah. And Destiny has
Nor
her hand.
really, just one thing, nor really, I think, is that a necessary goal, right? Because I think that if we do them in the right order, then what comes out of the May meeting gets operationalized by the work groups. And it feels like that is the right order. So I'm sorry, Destiny, go ahead, please.
Clarification question and a statement. I personally love working from the original document with the 4 core, because I feel like it allows us to really flesh some more ideas out, whereas AI has already generated, which will kind of, I feel, force us to fall in line with this. And I don't know if that's meeting yet. That's just because I think that was the purpose of this conversation, is to see these are the 5 areas we identified as core areas. What are our goals? That then leads me to, I think we need to take these core areas, define 3 goals or however many goals we decide we want to work on, to ensure that these 5 core areas meet those goals. So I would personally love to spend our time today identifying those goals, because as a commission, once I know the goal as the entire board, I can then align the work that we're doing within our committee. Not as a commission, as a committee. I can then define the work that we're going to do in our community to align our committee to align to the goals that we have identified as what we want to work on as a commission group. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that what would be maybe a good thought exercise to see if that holds water is to ask ourselves, for each of those 4 each of those core areas, if we start to pull on the threads of them, do they hold together? Do they make sense? And then if we said that our why are the things that we'd love to see happen, can they comfortably live inside those 4 goals? Because I think my initial thought looking at it is, yeah, it does. So what would it look like if we continued down that path? Does anyone else feel like that feels like a pain point for them or doesn't make sense?
What doesn't make sense?
To start in that way. To start with,
it makes
if
sense.
we unpack each of those 4 core areas. So maybe start with the easiest one first. Easiest one, I think, is the last one, which is having a goal that is our resource operational goal. Jim, is there an equivalent of that goal in the current plan?
I
was thinking of it as more of a service plan than including an infrastructure component.
Yeah, there's not anything like this in the current plan, at least not that I can think of right offhand.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some stuff in there about program outputs, and there's some stuff in there about doing different types of trainings, like disaster training and DEI training, but those are related to those specific goals that were identified as kind of the big picture goals that the commission wanted to pursue, and not as part of a comprehensive resource development type goal.
Got it. So what if that 4th goal is a goal for operational excellence, and wordsmith however you want to, but something of that type, and it includes training, staff support, board development, evaluation, and financial management. It's the operational committee.
But this one, so you're saying this focus, that core area of work is primarily internal. Is that right? Is that
Right.
Okay.
An operational internal focus. And that would include, nominating and board development, onboarding, being the, liaison with staff for staff support, also being the evaluation component and infrastructure pieces. So that would be the committee that would own the bylaws discussion that we had last year. It would be the committee that would own the conversations around whether we belong under finance or otherwise. Those kinds of things, I think, would fall under that operations committee. So if we just let that hold space for a minute, because you come back and, change that. Communications and partnerships, working our way up from the bottom. Nathan, who else is joining you from your committee?
Well, we had two more, but they're unavailable. So one of mine was Andrea, and the other one was Jason. So
okay.
The two people that are not on the call, those are my people. So it's good. It's all good. My initial thought is looking at the other. I think it makes sense that there is one that is focused on improving internal processes and the commission itself. I think that completely makes, like, that has to exist, right? We need to continue
finance,
to have these
HR, all that stuff. Right.
The other three, so the top three core areas, I guess I like the broad. I'm trying to remember how we landed on these, and I like them broadly. My one concern probably is I have another screen over here, and I just jotted down all of the initiatives the commission currently has: Tennessee Service Network, Corporate Social Purpose Awards, Disaster Conference, AmeriCorps. Most of those could also fit into all three of those. So I feel like I feel like we're back to the similar problem that we stated earlier with committees. So like if that makes sense, like these all seem to be maybe rephrasing the same task. Volunteer engagement through education, volunteer engagement. So that's the one piece one comment I may add is how do they seem to maybe be still a tad too broad perhaps, or overlap too much. But I think that's the neat thing.
I was just thinking, what if it's just like external stakeholder engagement, right? And then in that would be, there's a difference between getting people involved and making people aware. And I think that is where we need to differentiate what these other committees are going to do, right? Does communication and partnerships just make people aware? And then we would let volunteer placement and essential volunteerism get people engaged. That's my question and a thought.
So maybe keeping the broad areas covered by those three topics, but making it more clear what lives where.
Yes. And what your swim lane is, for lack of a better term of words. Like, you're not supposed to keep continuously reaching out and making sure they're invited and this and that. You're just supposed to make people aware, and then it would become other committees after that connection has been reached to then build off of that. I don't know if that works for you.
That I think that's a good thought, Destiny. One other thought I think adding to that, kind of building upon that, is maybe also viewing it from the lens of the audience or the stakeholder, right? When we talk about Volunteer Tennessee, we're talking about the volunteers, the people that are wanting to go out and serve. And we're also simultaneously talking about the entities that need the volunteers, right? So you're talking about the nonprofits, you're talking about the agencies. And I feel like those are two very distinct lanes, right? So increasing awareness and encouraging people to volunteer and giving them the resources and the capacity or the drive to volunteer is like a whole effort, right? But then doing some level of development, education, training, support for partners to increase their capacity to host a volunteer seems like a very different task, right? So when I think about our existing programs, when I think about the Tennessee Serves Network, I think about AmeriCorps, and to some extent, kind of corporate social purpose. Those three are about the entities that have resources, right? That we are providing people or money. When you talk about, I think when you start talking about like the conference, I would argue that the conference on volunteerism and service learning, the target audience probably isn't, at least the 2 years that I've been to the conference, the audience isn't really volunteers, right? The audience is more so the agencies, the partners, the entities that are doing the work. And I think those are two very, very different distinctions to me, right? So I don't know where that plays into this, but maybe that's where the muddiness is getting me a little bit, is I don't know how those two things play together and how we're trying to recruit volunteers versus we're trying to support entities that need volunteers, right? Education, professional development,
Nathan,
money.
What about this? I'm reflecting back to you what you're sharing in terms of like what would that language possibly look like? What if we thought of it as, you know, your point of thought of it as constituency focused. So we just talked about operations. The constituency for that, the target audience for that is internal. So that's our internal goal. And then the other three goals are our supported engagement of agencies, our supported engagement of individual volunteers, and our supported engagement of community. And that feels like that might have a lot of clarity to it. If you know who the stakeholder is that you're serving, I'm just thinking how powerful that could be in terms of being strategic, right? So one committee becomes the expert on our relationships with agencies through grant making and placements that work with volunteers. They know that piece of the work, right? They're the ones who know what agencies need, who understand what's happening with them. They become that voice. The second committee is all about things like building robust networks for volunteerism. They look at things like physical, mental, and behavioral health. They look at things like rural issues. They look at all that kind of stuff. And then the third is where the CSR, CSP group lives, as well as other communications that are community based. What about that as a framework? How does that feel to anybody else?
Sorry, Kim, I caught the support and engagement for agencies, support and engagement for something, and then support and engagement for volunteers, but I missed the something in the middle.
Oh, well, my shorthand I wrote down was agencies, people, and community.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm sure there's better words that would clarify our desired point of connection with each one, right? So we support agencies and volunteerism through blah, blah, blah. And that's the goal for agencies.
Okay. And one thing, just kind of to use your terminology, Kim, to reflect back what kind of I was hearing in terms of what this group identified the last time. What if this were not under this one, but under, so those two things go together under something, and you know, whether it's external stakeholder engagement or something else, those seem like connected bullet points that are, so this is the top one is kind of what we have to do with the requirements for federal grant making, et cetera. This is what we want to do in terms of getting out and doing other things. And this is what we need to do in terms of the internal stuff that we need to do to make sure that we're doing the two things that are above it. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, or I mean, I can very easily undo all of that with the click of a couple buttons.
So what would that look like in terms of the load for each of the three if you made stakeholder engagement a single committee? Is that, how does that feel as a committee in terms of like how much stuff lives under their aegis versus what lives under the other two? That would be my big question about that.
Yeah, well, it would be a lot. I mean, it's essentially everything except for, the internal stuff and then the grants related stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's kind of like the super committee that we have right now, the Communications Strategic Partnerships Committee, kind of.
Right.
So it would be a lot. But again, this was just a thought of grouping, right, and not necessarily a thought about structure.
Mm-hmm. Right. So is there a reason why the first committee isn't just called AmeriCorps Support? Is that like a taboo, or is that weird, or?
No, yeah. Well, the naming of the committees predates my time with the commission, so
okay.
So I don't know, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure what other commissions do in terms of how they name their committees. I know some of them do have,
or how they divide
committees.
The work.
Yeah, well, I know some of them. Most of them have a communications committee. Most of them have like an internal board operations type committee. Several of them that I know of have something similar to our grants committee, although they don't call it a grants committee, they call it other things, but it essentially kind of does, mm-hmm, kind of the same thing as the grants committee of doing kind of oversight, mm-hmm, of the funding stuff and making recommendations to the full committee or full commission on funding decisions, looking at return on investment, kind of all of that stuff. So, there may be commissions that call it like the AmeriCorps committee or something similar. I'm not sure though. I'd have to look.
I was just curious because it seems like that's one fairly discrete body of work that we do, from the grant review process through the evaluation and site visits and, that ongoing relationship with placements. And I know that Eileen mentioned before that it's kind of a hurry up and wait if it's grant specific, right? You guys have a big, heavy commitment for a shorter period of time, and then it's not quite as defined outside of that. Eileen, what's your thought on just calling it what it is?
And that's very true. It's like a heavy involvement for a shorter period of time, definitely. What I'm wondering is, in that first bullet where it says volunteer placement, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I mean, the AmeriCorps members at the programs recruit volunteers from the community, sorry, but that's not something that Volunteer Tennessee is actually hands-on, mm-hmm, with. We're certainly in the past have not been involved with engaging or recruiting volunteers for other purposes. The portal does that in kind of a virtual way. And we do have the grants for the volunteer engagement grants. So I'm I'm not sure what, like what we want to incorporate into the committee that's currently called the Grants Committee.
And I just pulled up the 2023 America's Service Commission's landscape survey. If people want me to throw that up, I can show you what other state commissions have for committees. Or if you don't want to see it because you don't want to be biased.
No, I think it's wise to learn from others if
Yeah,
it's
I
going
think it would
well.
be good
And if
to
it's
see
not
it.
going
Let's
well,
not
then we'll-
reinvent any wheels, right?
it's working. It's working.
Okay. And again, this is 2023. They haven't released the results of the 2024 survey
Mhm.
yet, but my guess is it probably will be fairly, whoops, sorry. It's very, very touchy. Okay, so hopefully you all can see it, but some sort of public policy, a grants review committee, program committee. I'm not sure how that's different from a grants committee. Volunteer engagement, nominating, executive, communications, resource development, and then other. Unfortunately, the other doesn't specify. It asks for specifying, but this report doesn't show what those other committees
It
are.
doesn't give you the open response answers to that one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But my guess is, again, because they're committees that don't fit in one of these buckets, it's probably a bunch of little one-offs, or maybe there's two or three commissions that have a certain type. But
Right.
these are
Right,
kind of
right.
the biggies.
What's the difference between a program committee and a volunteer engagement committee?
I don't know. I don't know. And the way this survey works, sorry, I'm trying to get all of the stuff on the screen at the same time. The way that this survey works is they provide the things that are listed here. You can check the ones that you have, that your commission has. And then if you have ones that don't fit into one of these categories, you put it into other. So for example, we have a Foundations of Service Committee and Strategic Partnerships Committee. Neither one of those really fits in one of these categories. So I always put those
Right.
two under other.
Got it. That is so interesting. I'm like, I'd be so curious to know, like, how many committees do some of these groups have? Like, is it that people are organized differently, or that some have a lot of committees and some have very few? I think it gives me more questions than it does answers.
Yeah. Well, again, I did warn you that it might
Yeah,
your-
no, I mean, it's good food for thought. It's just I'm not sure how to chew and swallow. It's good food.
well,
So do we have an executive committee? I mean, de facto, everybody does, right? That's the officers.
yeah, so the commission does have an executive committee that's made up of the officers and the chair of each committee. That's how
Right.
Volunteer Tennessee's executive committee is organized. And it might be helpful to look at the percentages. So, it's like
Mhm.
almost 90% have an executive committee, which I'm surprised it's not 100%.
Right.
But then the next highest is the grant review, which is a little bit over 50%.
Right.
So, the percentages aren't really high on a lot of these. I think you could say roughly the grants review and then public policy, roughly half the commissions have both of those, and then
Mhm.
a lot have communication. So I think it's not the case where they, most of the commissions have all of these. It's probably, kind of like Volunteer Tennessee. The Volunteer Tennessee has 5 standing committees. My guess is that most commissions have 3 or 4 that, again,
Right.
most of them are going to fit in with these categories up here, and then the others that are kind of random ones.
I'm a little bit surprised at the percentage that have a nominating committee, because that's usually not a year-round function. That's kind of a freebie.
It might be an ad hoc, committee that's
Yeah, that would make
just
sense. Yeah.
convenes at the time. We have
When
we have
needed,
that
yeah.
built in to board development.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So it doesn't count really as your committee placement. It's that it's activated when it's needed. That makes more sense.
That's what it seems like.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of nonprofits have that structure where the nominating committee only meets at the time that it's time for them to do their work. Whereas the Volunteer Tennessee has had the board development committee, which has the nominations as one of its responsibilities, but does other stuff as well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that would fall in the model that we were talking about earlier. That would fall under operations and infrastructure, right? So board and nominating would fall within that category.
Mm-hmm.
So let's come back to this question then about the other, and I'm sorry that it's not a more elegant word, it's just how my brain works, about these other, what feels like maybe 3 big buckets of work. One is the granting program and the things related to that, which may or may not be AmeriCorps specific. Work with supporting the volunteerism of individuals. And you all would have to do a better job than I could of what lives in that piece of the world. And then what we've referred to as community or communications or partnerships. It feels like that's a little bit of a fuzzy group that's working with communities or organizations other than AmeriCorps? Question mark. Any thoughts from anybody on what they think those want to break down to, or what would drive that? Okay. All right, how about this for a suggestion? One of the things that I always like if I'm asked to serve on a committee somewhere is that the committees hold together pretty well in terms of what skill sets determine what committee I'd be the best member for. Like, for example, I think that's why communications frequently ends up being a committee in places, because I'm good at working with external stakeholders. I'm good at not necessarily PR, but sharing the good news and bringing people together. And I think that's why frequently things like partnerships fall in that category. I think grant making is a pretty specific set of skills and training that we do that makes sense to me, that's why that kind of falls together. It seems like a lot of what we do around volunteerism would fall into categories of things like the awards and conferences and things like that. That's a different skill set. Does that make sense?
Yes, when you say skill set, I'm also hearing actions, but I think skills, I think of a task, right? So I'm going to counteract everything that I said a few minutes ago. So a few minutes ago, I said,
love you.
That's how we do it. So a few minutes ago, we said, or I said, not we, it was totally Nathan, I own it. I said, maybe viewing it from the lens of the audience. And then as we're getting into this conversation, I'm not liking that anymore. And part of that being is a lot of those things overlap, right? Like the needs of the agency to people in the community is all going to be, they all need communication, right? They all need. So I'm now more to your comment. I'm now more kind of in the lens. I've got it on my other screen. I've got just a Word doc and I'm just jumble noting. And I'm kind of now in the headspace of back to buckets of work, but more in terms of like almost like mini missions, right? Like promoting volunteerism and community engagement, right? Like that essentially is communication fairly heavily, right? Like it would be the equivalent of communication. So promoting volunteerism and community engagement would be is a task, right? How is that done? That's done through communications. That's done through awards and recognition. That's done through story collection, right? Like all of that really broadly is communications, but it serves the role of promoting volunteerism and community engagement, right? Then I think about the Tennessee Serves Network. I think about corporate social purpose. Both of those are really around capacity building, right? And then I think about the Conference on Volunteerism and Service Learning. I think about our disaster services work. I think about, some of the lunch and learns and things that happen, all those kinds of things. All of that is really in my mind around resources and education. And then there's still, of course, the elephant, which is the AmeriCorps grant thing, right? Because it kind of is its own beast. But in my mind, it's like those are really the three areas of work. We're promoting people to volunteer and to be engaged and recognizing them for their work, which is really communications. You're supporting entities that are invested in the work, which is capacity building. That could be nonprofits through the Serves Network, or that could be businesses through CSP. Or broadly speaking, you're just trying to offer some level of engagement, education, resources to help all of those entities do their work better, right? Which is where the conference comes in. So that now is also kind of where my head is at, promoting volunteerism, capacity building, education. And then the grants, again, I keep going back to maybe the AmeriCorps grant things is not a standing, it maybe isn't as needed. Or it's a part of a larger committee, but that's kind of where my head's at the moment. To not get us anywhere and to open up the can even bigger, but I think Destiny said she likes the as needed idea. I think referencing the AmeriCorps grant thing.
Yeah. What if that lived under building capacity as a subcommittee that's activated to manage awards in that context? Because that is building volunteerism capacity, isn't it?
I think logically, I think that makes sense, right? Because essentially what we're doing, but in most cases, when you think of AmeriCorps, we are increasing the ability for a community partner to do their work better or at an increased amount because they have additional hands and support, right? I mean, there's a lot of entities across the state that wouldn't be able to do the work they're doing in terms of quantity without AmeriCorps people. Placements, right? So I mean, I think it is capacity building. I agree. It's increasing the work of existing partners.
So question for you, teasing this out a little further, define for me the difference between education and engagement and communications. And maybe it's education and then communications and engagement. Like, where's the line between those two in your mind in that scenario? That's the only one that's a blurry line for me.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think in my mind, and I think you bring up a good point, maybe it is some wordsmithing perhaps. I think I'm distinguishing somehow, and I want to workshop this out loud, so it's going to sound like word vomit, but it's just going to be what it is when I think of education, so I think about the Conference on Volunteerism and Service Learning. So I'll use that as a very practical example, right?
Okay. The
expectation in my mind is not that volunteerism in and of itself is going to come out of that conference. Like that is not the intent of that program. That program is, in my mind, is to educate, support, provide best practices, resources, connections to partners so they can do better. Okay. Yeah. So it's more indirect, if that makes sense, I think, in my mind. Versus when I think of promoting volunteerism and community engagement directly, I'm thinking about the service itself, perhaps. So that, again, is where I think more about actually encouraging people to volunteer, recognizing people that are doing exceptional volunteerism. So that's where the various awards of excellence, GVSA, all those things. I think story collection, I think that's something we've tried to dabble in a little bit here recently, but I know we've not necessarily had a priority on it, right? As how are we uplifting successes and stories which really is some heavy communication. So I guess there's more of the direct recruiting and encouraging volunteerism and education and resources for partners to do their work better, I guess. That may not make sense, but and maybe it's just some wordsmithing. Maybe my labels maybe are what's wrong.
No, I'm just trying to figure out what would live in communications and engagement in that model. And you mentioned before storytelling would, also the awards would.
Awards and recognition. Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. I mean, really just that story collection, promoting. I mean, communication in of itself is a lot of work, right? We know that, especially considering several staff members are currently sharing some of those duties and responsibilities. So I know that there's a lot there, but yeah, something along those lines. And again, maybe some wordsmithing, but.
Actually, I like story collection. It's good imagery.
And just to do a quick time check, an hour has flown by and it's 3:58 Central.
Yep. I think we're close. Can we pinch a little bit more? I know we're.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah, this is Eileen. I like the idea that you mentioned, Kim, about grants committee becoming part of another committee. Because an issue that we have run into with the grants committee is that it's very small. And at some crucial times during the year, the grants committee needs to make decisions about funding that and then their recommendations are passed on to the larger commission. And I don't feel like we, as our committee stands right now, that we don't have a big enough committee to for me to feel comfortable with putting decisions forth to the entire commission. So I like the idea of becoming part of another committee.
Great. I mean, you would certainly be the one with the best idea of what feels like a right size for that. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah.
Encouraging and support. So here's what I think maybe I heard, if this sounds right. We have a lot of folks who were internal processors, who are not like Nathan and I, who are external processors, and we think with our mouths, which is why I love you, Nathan. That was nothing but a compliment. But I'm the same way. If we, and again, not wordsmithing this, but just thinking about the nature of how each of these pieces would fit together. And I'm trying to make them all consistent. So they're all INGs, okay? So operating with excellence, or whatever we want to call that. Operating services, operating process, whatever you want to call it. Building capacity. And the committee that's the capacity building is the grants committee, the service network, and the pieces that are those pieces, parts related to fundable opportunities and the placements related to those. Encouraging and supporting volunteerism. That is volunteer engagement, skill building, education. It includes the conference. It's these people are already interested in volunteerism. How do we make sure they're good at it? And then promoting volunteerism, which is communications, storytelling, and partnership building. So the goal description is a little bit more about not the what, but the why, so that the committee could better manage the cadence of its work based on where opportunities happen. She says with a question mark.
Yeah, I know. I like this because I think about my Frankenstein committee, communications and partnerships.
Right.
So
Right.
I think about,
Right.
but even if it was split, right? I think about partnerships, right? Strategic
Mm-hmm.
partnerships to what end, right? Like I'm building
That's right.
partnerships with the intent of increasing capacity.
You're
I'm building
promoting
partnerships.
volunteerism.
Exact, right. So I think
Mm-hmm.
what I like about this model is the task is very clear, right? If I'm on a committee,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what we call the committee, right? If the focus of the committee is building capacity, that is a very specific, tangible task, right? We are trying to increase capacity.
Measurable.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
which is very different than communications, right? Like that is a very distinct line. I feel like right now our current committee structure, there is a little bit too much overlap because everybody can see everything as being in every lane. Right. So I do like that there's some very clear, this committee's task before them is to increase capacity for volunteerism and community service. The mission of, this committee's capacity is very much to improve the excellence in the operations of the commission, right? Like it seems very black and white. It seems more clear. I like it. And again, we could wordsmith some of it, but bucket wise, I like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that if that direction also gives the potential to have some flexibility over the course of 3 years, that what looks like the best tool to accomplish that this year may not be tomorrow's next best tool, but we still know what our North Star is. The role of this committee is to build capacity for volunteerism, and we're going to brainstorm the best ways to do that. And some of them are going to work and we're going to keep doing them, and some of them we'll try and we might redirect later. But we know that what we're supposed to be accomplishing.
And
Other thoughts?
well, Kim, before we get too far, can I
Yeah.
caught the building capacity, promoting volunteerism, and then you said encouraging something and something that I was trying to.
Encouraging and supporting volunteerism, which in my mind is anything that's related to recruitment and skill building of individual volunteers, but it just, sticking with the theme, is that something that encourages and supports volunteerism? A conference supports volunteerism, right? So,
Gotcha. Okay.
And building capacity, promoting volunteerism, and then operating would be the fourth one.
Oh, so okay. So, operating with internal excellence. Okay. So, whoops. So, this one, the one at the very top, I think, got moved under building capacity. I think. The operating with internal excellence, that becomes its own thing down here as number 4, I think. Oops. Oops. Only I said 4 and I think it auto corrected it to. Okay.
It thinks it's so smart.
I've got a student at my door, so I'm waiting on me. So I'm going to hop off. I like where we're at. I like this direction. I know you all are going to get it organized.
You give this a thumbs up.
Thought-wise, I like it. I think this is good. So,
okay.
Thank you all.
So then the this other stuff, the kind of the communication stuff, would go under kind of the
promoting.
Volunteerism, just to kind of stay with the
right. How would it align? Right.
Yeah. Right. How does it align with what the group did? And I'll fix the stuff. Yeah. And then essentials of it sounds like this would go under the
encouraging and supporting.
Let's see. Eileen here. I have a question for the encouraging and supporting. What about adding celebrating there, or would you consider that being covered enough under supporting?
I think it'd be great to call that out specifically, because to me, that's a big piece of what encouraging is, right? One of the best ways to encourage something is to celebrate success with it. That's
right, to keep the people
wonderful to me.
Keep them coming.
And I think that would be done in some level of handshake sort of partnership with with the promoting volunteerism group because they're telling stories and celebrating successes, but they're more telling the story of it, right? Not the mechanics behind it.
Right.
So then with the awards, because the awards was the kind of under promoting volunteerism, would that go under encouraging, celebrating, and supporting?
I think it would be
Anybody
appropriate
want
to
to?
go there. Yeah.
No, I think it's different. I think promoting is the communications piece,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and the encouraging, celebrating is, having the conference, having the GBSA.
Mm-hmm.
The promoting the volunteerism would be like more telling about those things.
So then the awards would, I think, based on that would, sorry.
Number one.
Would go under one.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
Greg, is that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I also think that's a great example of where not everything can be siloed, right? Because a great job with the awards is going to involve the promoting volunteerism committee, making sure that every county who has the option to nominate someone does so, right? They might be the outreach piece of that, or they might help design some of the language for the award, that kind of thing. But that's just
Right.
good. That's just good business.
And getting sponsorships also.
Yes. Yep. That would absolutely fall into promoting volunteerism.
Mhm.
So, Jim, I think the next step for this that we don't have the time to do would be then who, if these are realigned in this way, who is going to lead the next step for some version of each of these four, since it's not literally the existing committee structure.
Mhm.
And I think that's crucial for you to not lose momentum before May. Somebody needs to be the advocate for each of these.
Yeah, well, I would say I would say that the full commission needs buy-in to these four things before we, in my opinion, go too much further.
No, I'm just thinking it'd be great if there was somebody who advocated for, some version of each of these as it's presented to the full commission. Who's going to be the one who represents what we think we'll do with that, and then they're
Gotcha.
theoretically going to be
Okay.
part of that committee moving forward. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Kim,
Okay.
do you imagine the need of it being four different people, or can it just be one person who can speak on what we've been working on? We flesh it out. These are ideas, kind of thing.
I think in the moment of being in the commission meeting, it's just one person can explain what we came up with. My concern is how does that translate into it not then flapping in the wind and somebody having some accountability for ensuring it doesn't get derailed. That's really just all my concern was. Like, is Nathan going to say promoting volunteerism is still mine, even though it's not exactly what it was before, but I've got thoughts on how this will be the plan, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I was assuming that was kind of an understanding why you had all of us here was saying like, hey, you're still going to be the chair of this committee and we're going to, but we're fleshing out the role may change.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I think
that's awesome if that's how you want to take it. I didn't want to assume.
Yeah. I thought that's why you brought us all to the table of like, speak now, forever hold your peace. You're chairing this committee, so we're giving you an insight in it, but we're all in agreement that we need to flesh this out to be better aligned to where we're trying to go.
Love your answer.
Now, again, I think I might be the only chair on here, so I can't speak for. I'm gonna speak for Nathan because he's not here. I think Nathan will be okay.
He already
Well,
said yes.
Greg's on.
He's in,
Greg's
he's
on
in
as
good
well.
shape.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Greg's here.
Great.
And Eileen, it affects you because we're talking about how the grants process would fall under another place too, right?
Right.
But Eileen already agreed to that one, so I feel
Yeah.
like we were on the
Okay.
same page. Okay.
And I think Betty had a comment.
Yeah, Betty.
Betty, did you want to say something? No. Okay.
She's giving us the sign language again. Well, then I don't need to create an opportunity for consensus that already exists.
So
I will say, I do believe that if the chairs are all on here and if everyone has a part in doing this and agrees to how this is being restructured, it shouldn't be difficult to present it to the entire commission.
Mm-mm.
And at the last commission meeting, Kim, everyone said, yes, we would like for you to show us how to restructure things so that they align with our tasks and with our mission. So I mean, maybe we will have someone flapping in the wind, but I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, if this feels good and it lands, you know, why continue to circle if it's going to land the plane?
I have another question. So if we're going to, if part of this is restructuring our committees, and in order to flesh out details for this plan, we need to work in our committees. Do we agree on the new committee structure first and then continue to work on the plan? Because otherwise, we're going to be working in committees. It's confusing. It's all kind of wrapped up together, but I wonder if we need to get agreement on changing committees first and then work in those new committees on fleshing out the details of the plan. Does that make sense? Does my question make sense?
I felt like that's what Jim said.
Oh, okay.
Getting agreement on this first.
I think Eileen's getting a more nuanced, has a more nuanced question. I was just saying in general, we need to get buy-in from the full commission, but what Eileen is saying, I think, is this is a potential new structure for committees, but we have the old structure that's doing the work right now to form this plan. Do we need to go ahead and have people reformulate under this potential committee structure to go forward with the remaining planning that the commission needs to do for the rest of the year? I think that's what Eileen was suggesting.
Yeah, because I think if we didn't do it that way, if we were still working on this in our old committees, it would be convoluted somehow, because maybe people may move around also because of this. You know, so somebody who's on I don't know what, who's on some other committee might now end up in building capacity and having to think about grants, which they didn't have to do before.
And Destiny raised a hand.
I am in agreement with everyone said, but I would just speak on behalf of our committee. LaShawn, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like the committee I had, which was Foundations of Service, would be the encouraging, celebrating, supporting volunteerism area. And I personally believe as the work that we've done already fits in this new structure, because that's the mindset we came in there with. So for me, in my committee, I'll say we don't need to redo it. So I'm confident for us, we can go forward with it. So if you bring other people together, don't feel the need to have to include us, because I think that we really started our plan this year with this mindset of what is in our control. If it's not in our control, we're gonna hand that off to someone else's and let that be somebody else's ministry.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and so I think I think for the purposes of continuing to work on the plan, as opposed to continuing to have the committees that we currently have continue to do the work that they have kind of allocated to them for this current calendar year, it may make sense to have volunteers from all the committees agree to work on these areas, and we have essentially 4 ad hoc committees that are made up of people maybe primarily from certain committees that would be taking on that role going forward. Maybe I'm not really sure how to squeeze what we have, what this committee just did into the current committee structure.
Mhm.
Well, what if it stayed a strategic planning ad hoc committee
Sure.
that continues to move forward with this process and invite other people to join it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll have to run that
Because I
by
think you
Terry.
make a good point. Yeah, you don't want to hijack the work currently being done with the planning of what to do next. And so maybe it's helpful if those do stay distinct.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help continue in whatever process we do.
Okay.
But I do have a meeting that started 3 minutes ago. So.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much, Kim. Thanks. Well, we'll pick this up, I think, at the May meeting and kind of figure out where to go next.
Okay. And reach out to me in between if there's something I can do to help tee it up. But if no one has heartburn with this, I think that feels like tremendous process improvement in a little over an hour. I think that was fantastic.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And Jim,
everyone.
Are you going to
Yeah.
send us a draft of this?
Yeah, I'll actually, I'll send out these notes to the entire group and ask for people, because we did have a couple people who had to get off before we kind of got to the point where we are. But I'll send it out and ask people if they have any kind of comments or suggest, and maybe we can just via email do any kind of revisions that we need to do before the May meeting.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Talk to you soon.